The cottage stood alone, shrouded in an eerie silence. Moonlight painted long, skeletal shadows of the trees onto the old stone walls. Emily, seeking solace from the city, was captivated by the desolate charm. Its isolation was a haunting prelude to a night of terror. The air, heavy with damp earth, whispered secrets of a troubled past. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. The musty smell of disuse hung heavy in the air. Cobwebs adorned the corners. Emily was determined to make the cottage her sanctuary. She lit a fire, the flames casting a warm glow. As she unpacked, she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Night fell, blanketing the cottage in darkness. The silence was broken only by the crackling fire and an occasional owl hoot. Emily sat by the fire, a book in her hand, but the words swam before her eyes. Every creak and rustle sent a shiver down her spine. The solitude, once a welcome escape, now felt suffocating. She tried to focus on her book, but the unease persisted. A cold draft seeped through the room, though all windows were shut. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against the unnerving silence. A sudden sound cut through the silence like a shard of glass, a slow, deliberate creak. The door to the hallway, which Emily had closed earlier, was now ajar. It swung inward silently, revealing only darkness beyond. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her eyes fixed on the open doorway. Her pulse quickened, each beat a drum of fear in her ears. She stared at the doorway, her mind racing. Had she forgotten to latch it properly, or had something or someone opened it? She listened intently, but the only sound was the frantic thumping of her own heart. The silence was more terrifying than any noise. It spoke of an unseen presence, watching, waiting. Mustering a shaky breath, Emily rose to her feet. She told herself it was just the wind, an old house settling. She cautiously approached the open doorway, her hand trembling as she reached for the light switch. The sudden illumination revealed an even more unsettling sight. Footprints, muddy and distinct, marred the pristine layer of dust on the hallway floor. They were large footprints, too large to be hers. A wave of dizziness washed over Emily. She was no longer alone. Someone had been in the cottage, had walked the hallway while she sat by the fire, oblivious. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through her fear. Her gaze followed the trail of footprints, leading from the front door towards her, stopping abruptly at the edge of the light. The unseen visitor had stood there watching her, their presence hidden in the shadows. Her eyes fell on an object at the end of the hall, catching the dim light. An antique mirror, its ornate frame tarnished with age, hung on the wall. As Emily stared at its dusty surface, she could have sworn she saw a flicker of movement reflected back at her. A fleeting glimpse of a figure, tall and shadowy, standing in the darkness behind her. Her breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in her throat. She spun around, her heart pounding against her ribs, but the hallway was empty. There was no one there. Had she imagined it? A trick of the light, a figment of her fear-stoked imagination? She told herself it had to be, yet a chilling certainty settled in her gut. The footprints, the open door, the figure in the mirror, it was all too real, too terrifying to be dismissed. Panic seized Emily. She didn't wait to see who or what had left those footprints, had watched her from the shadows. She fled, racing back through the cottage, grabbing her phone and keys in a blind rush. The old door creaked shut behind her as she stumbled out into the night, the cool air stinging her lungs. As she drove away, the cottage shrinking in her rearview mirror, A single haunting question echoed in the silence of the car. She had escaped the cottage, but had she escaped the unseen presence that lingered within its walls? And was it truly gone, or was it still watching, waiting for her return?